What are some common mistakes people make when setting beneficiaries? Hi, I'm estate planning and probate attorney Joel Beck with Peach State Wills and Trust, and we'll talk about that question in today's short video. So what are mistakes that people make when setting beneficiary designations? Well, that's a good question. Let's start first with understanding what beneficiary designations are and what they do. Essentially, a beneficiary designation is a plan you make to identify where an asset goes when you die. These are very commonly used on life insurance policies as well as retirement accounts like an IRA, an individual retirement account, or a 401k or other similar retirement accounts. You can also have beneficiary designations on regular bank accounts like checking and savings accounts, as well as regular investment accounts. And they are usually called a POD or TOD beneficiary designation. POD means pay on death. TOD stands for transfer on death. But with any of these beneficiary designations, what it means is that when you die, the asset goes to that beneficiary. And that happens generally outside of your will or outside of a trust. We call it a non-probate asset when it has a beneficiary designation like that. So what are some common mistakes people make? The first one is listing an unintended beneficiary. Here's an example. You have a minor child and you want to leave money from a life insurance policy to care for your child, but you know that your child can't manage the money, can't receive the money because they're 5 or 6 years old, for example, they're minors. So you make the beneficiary of that life insurance policy your brother or another friend, somebody who's an adult that could receive it. Well, here's the problem with that. You have a risk of loss and a risk of loss of use here, essentially. When you give those assets to these other beneficiaries instead of where you want it to go, there's no legal obligation for that person to actually take the money and use it to benefit your child. Once you give it to the beneficiary, it's the beneficiary's. And the second problem comes into play where maybe that person is trustworthy. They're going to take that asset and use it solely to help your child. But if that other person gets into a problem with creditors, gets sued, has a big judgment against them or whatnot, your money, that life insurance policy proceeds, are now going to be used to satisfy the creditors of that unintended beneficiary that you gave the money to. So the way to solve that problem is to simply leave the assets for the use of your intended beneficiary. And if that's a minor child, then perhaps you're going to use a will, a trust created in the will, or a standalone trust to receive those assets in the name of the trust so that they can only be used for your intended beneficiaries. A second mistake people make when naming beneficiaries is not going deep enough. Here's what I mean by that. You list a person to be the beneficiary, but there's always a risk that that person may die before you or with you. And so you want to go deeper than just listing one beneficiary. You want to have a backup, a secondary or a contingent beneficiary to outline your wishes for where that asset goes if your primary beneficiary is deceased. A third common mistake is not updating beneficiaries after a life change, such as a divorce or a breakup of another committed relationship. You see, a divorce does not override a beneficiary designation on a retirement account. So if you have an IRA, a 401k, something like that, and you have your ex-spouse listed as the beneficiary, that ex-spouse is still the beneficiary and is still going to receive that asset. So if you undergo a life event, a change like that, you want to always update your beneficiary designations to make sure that they appropriately reflect what you want to happen. And then the fourth common mistake we'll share today is really a lack of coordination. If you have certain plans specified, say in a will or in a trust, for how you want things handled, and you intend to use assets to fulfill those plans, but you have beneficiary designations on those assets that are at odds with that plan, then those assets that have the beneficiary designations aren't going to be used and to be coordinated and consistent with your overall plan. So if the assets go somewhere else through a designation, they're not going to be available to fulfill whatever plan or goals you have laid out in your will or your trust. So those are examples of 4 common mistakes people make when using beneficiary designations. Remember that beneficiary designations is it's a really important part of your overall estate plan. And if you've not done that planning, maybe it's time for you to take a step and do that. You might want to take that first step by getting our guide to estate planning in Georgia. We give it away for free, no strings attached. Just go to peachstatewills.com, click on free info at the top, and then estate planning resources. You can download our free guide. Or if you're ready to talk to an experienced estate planning attorney, you can contact us at 678-344-5342. Thanks.